and I'm sure others in the audience have, is why this story specifically? What was the reasoning to go towards this family? Because I know Black land loss is such a huge phenomenon affecting so many. So what drew you to the Rios family specifically?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting the film to be here. And Philadelphia is a great place to show these kinds of work. And but to answer your question, I'd like to go back a little bit. Initially, when Raoul was working on this film, he was really approached to be a producer, an executive producer on the film. There was another director on the project, and initially it was a Juvie production with Amazon and ProPublica. And so he was familiar with the story that Yace Sula had written, and that's why when he was approached to help as a producer, he was really interested. And eventually, the director who was on the project, since it was taking so long, was offered another project and went to do that project. And Raoul at that point was asked if he wanted to direct the project. And the first thing he wanted to do was actually meet the family. And although the story was important to him, the premise of what's happening with Black land loss in America was a big issue, and also related to some of other experience in land loss, even in Haiti and in Africa and places that he grew up. And so we figured out a way that it was important to go to North Carolina to visit the Rios. And the writer, Lizzie Presser, who had been with the family for over 3 years reporting on this case, told us that it was going to be Gertrude's 95th birthday, and it was a perfect opportunity to go to North Carolina. And so we were invited to go, and so we had a small crew. And I think one of the EPs is here right there, Henry. And we headed there. And as soon as we met the family, it was as if we already knew them, because they were very welcoming, very loving. And at no point were they sort of telling us what to say. So it was a family like your family, families that, people we all know. And so from that point on, Raoul said he had to tell that story. And so, since the article had really clearly, in a very detailed way, explained the story of Black land loss in America, which is an ongoing story, which is not only about Black land loss in a sense, it's about how people who are other people of color, white people in general, who don't have the means to protect. And was that me, or is that?
You have to hold that big
have a way to protect their land, go through this kind of horrific experience. And so he wanted to tell a story that was not a victim story, because most of the stories we hear around issues like that, and most of the stories we often hear in documentary filmmaking sometimes, or even narrative stories, are often around victims. And he didn't want this family to be seen as victims. They were fighting. They had been fighting for decades for their rights to own their land. And so from the beginning, he knew that's what he wanted to tell.
Thank you for that. And I want to follow up, because you talk about not wanting them to be portrayed on screen as victims. Are there any ethical considerations that you all took when making this film? Because in the film, you'll see that the family is being taken advantage of. a lot of times by various people who claim to be able to help them with this issue. So coming in with, you know, a crew, a small crew, what are things that you thought, was there anything that you did during like interviews with the family or anything that you told them to make them feel affirmed and safe, or was there just that camaraderie already once you got to meet them?
No, we didn't have to really tell anything. They had been telling that story for a long time. It's just that people weren't listening. When ProPublica was researching their story, they also had a small crew that was documenting a lot of what was happening at the time. And they were there during the time when Curtis and Melvin were still in jail. So they had actually about 90 hours of footage, and some of it made it into this film, and it was incredible material. And so that material was really used as archival material. The family was very open and wanted to tell their story. For Raoul, not only did he not want to do a victim story, but he felt it very important, and I think you mentioned that during your introduction. Part of his work is really to have people tell their own story, and in this case have these matriarch be the center of the story, because they were holding their family stories. They were very clear about what they were going through, and they were very able to engage us, not just us as filmmakers, but the rest of the larger community. And so it was important for him to put in front and center, because often those voices are never heard. Stories are told from the top down. And so I hope that answers your question.
No, very apt, thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience before I proceed? Right here.
Kudos on a wonderful film, and I especially loved the portraits of the family members and the use of the family tree. Can you just talk about how that came to be and who the artist was and that?
Yeah, actually there are many artists on it, but so I'll let you read the names. But the idea initially was, it's a very complicated story, and also it's a large family over many decades, and so Raoul wanted to find a way to help us navigate all these different details, and yet still make sure that we could relate to that family. And so eventually he settled on really the family tree that continuously is growing, that sometimes in jail the vines can die, can separate, and not continue. So yeah, that was important. And also showing time, passing time, showing how someone like Curtis, as a young boy, gradually becomes this old man. You can see how happy, how his eyes were as a young boy, and then by the end, how traumatized he had become.
It really helped a lot.
I have a follow-up to that, and this will be our final question because we have a couple of minutes left. But speaking of Why Curtis and the ending, there's something that I was thinking about that made me think of I'm Not Your Negro and how that film ended, with James Baldwin speaking to how he cannot be a pessimist, right? He has to preserve some sort of optimism. And then the film, we see like the sort of family setting, and then Why Curtis goes off by himself. and you know, he ponders on the time that was taken from him. And I was wondering if that was like an intentional decision to end the film that way, not necessarily on a pessimistic note, but a film that like addresses the reality of what has happened to this family and how like precarious time is.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Raoul did not want to make a happy ending story because it is not a happy ending story. It's a story about a continuous struggle. And so he could have ended with them coming out of jail and everyone's happy, but that is not the reality. And he wanted to make sure that we, as a larger community, and with them, realized that it was a continuous battle, not just for them, but for many other families.
Thank you so much for that. I'm so sorry that we have to wrap early. Fortunately for the students in Philadelphia, they will be spending a lot of time at the Q&A on our Thursday screening next week, so sucks for you guys. No laughs? Everyone disappointed? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Peck. And yes, enjoy the festival.